Land. The one thing they are not making more of. Here in Australia, the median price for a square metre of vacant land in Sydney is nudging $1,000. In Perth, over $700. In Melbourne, do not even ask. But mate, this country is massive, and once you leave the coastal bubble, the prices drop so hard it feels like the economy is playing a joke on you. Blocks bigger than small European farms for the cost of a second-hand ute. Today, we are counting down the 10 most affordable places to buy land in Australia right now. Real places, real prices, real opportunities for anyone brave enough to look beyond the postcode snobbery. Let us get into it. So, subscribe and let's start. Number 10, Glenfern, Tasmania. Let us start at the bottom of the country, which feels appropriate given we are also starting at the bottom of the list. Tasmania, the Apple Isle. The place mainland Australians forget about until someone mentions cheap property, and then suddenly everybody is interested and everybody has an opinion about whether it counts as a real state. It does. It very much does. And Glenfern, a small rural locality about 45 kilometres from the Hobart Central Business District, is proof that affordable land in Tasmania is not just a rumour whispered between property investors at dinner parties. Located with the township of New Norfolk just down the road for your basic supplies, which in Tasmanian terms means a supermarket, a pub, and enough social infrastructure to prevent you from going completely feral. Glenfern offers blocks of land that make mainland prices look like an elaborate scam. We are talking about parcels of 12 hectares or more with gravel driveways and cleared house sites ready to build on. 12 hectares. That is not a block of land, that is a small kingdom. You could fit an entire Melbourne apartment complex on one corner of it and still have room for a vineyard, a hobby farm, and an existential crisis about why you did not move here sooner. The township of New Norfolk itself has a population of around 6,000 people and sits on the banks of the Derwent River. It has schools, medical facilities, cafes, and a heritage streetscape that is genuinely charming if you are into that sort of thing. The drive to Hobart is under an hour, which means you can access a proper city when you need to, but spend most of your time surrounded by rolling green hills, temperate rainforest, and the kind of silence that city people find either therapeutic or absolutely terrifying depending on their relationship with their own thoughts. The Derwent Valley, for those unfamiliar, is one of Tasmania's oldest settled regions. It has a history that stretches back to the convict era, and the landscape reflects that layered past with heritage homes, old hop kilns, and farmland that has been worked continuously for nearly 200 years. The soil is fertile, the rainfall is reliable, and the growing conditions are suitable for everything, from berries to hops to premium cool climate wine grapes. If you are the kind of person who has ever fantasized about growing your own food on your own land while staring at mountains from your own veranda, this is the place where that fantasy becomes financially viable. Tasmania has experienced significant property growth in recent years, but the rural areas surrounding Hobart still offer extraordinary value compared to the mainland. Blocks that would cost you $500,000 2 hours from Sydney can be found here for a fraction of that price. The catch, if you can call it a catch, is that you are in Tasmania. It rains. It is cold. The internet is sometimes more of a suggestion than a service. But for people who want land, real land, enough land to do something meaningful with, Glenfern and the surrounding Derwent Valley are opportunities that are not going to last forever. What, the mainlanders are coming. They always do. Number 9, Mildura region, Victoria. Victoria, the state where everything is expensive and everybody complains about it while simultaneously refusing to leave. But venture northwest, far northwest, past the goldfields and the wheat country, and the point where the mobile reception starts to become more aspirational than functional, and you will find the Mildura region. And in the Mildura region, farmland and residential land prices are so low they make the rest of Victoria look like it belongs to a different economy, which in many ways it does. According to the Rural Bank Farmland Values Report, Mildura offers the cheapest farmland in Victoria with a median price of around $1,753 per hectare. Let that sink in. $1,753 per hectare. In a state where a one-bedroom apartment in Richmond costs the same as a small rural property in this region. The cumulative average growth rate over the past 5 years has been around 5.6%, which means values are ticking upward, but slowly enough that the window of opportunity has not slammed shut. Mildura itself is a proper regional city. Population around 35,000 in the urban area and about 55,000 in the broader municipality. It has hospitals, schools, a university campus, shopping centres, restaurants, an airport with flights to Melbourne, a cultural scene that includes theatres, galleries, and an annual jazz festival that is inexplicably well attended for a town in the middle of nowhere. And it sits on the banks of the Murray River, which means water, irrigation, and agricultural potential that has sustained the region for over a century. The surrounding areas, towns like Uyen, Redcliffs, Robinvale, and Wentworth just over the New South Wales border, offer even cheaper land. We are talking about residential blocks for under $50,000 and rural acreages that would bankrupt you in any coastal state, but here cost less than a decent second-hand car. The soil is good, the climate is warm, the community is established, and the distance from Melbourne, approximately 550 kilometres, is enough to keep the property speculators at bay for now. The irrigation infrastructure in the Mildura region is a genuine asset. The Murray River system supports horticultural operations that produce everything from wine grapes to citrus to almonds, and the region exports significant volumes of agricultural product both domestically and internationally. This is not marginal land on the edge of sustainability. This is productive, irrigated, established agricultural country that happens to be cheap because most Victorians cannot point to it on a map and would rather spend $700,000 on a 2-bedroom apartment in Footscray than own 40 hectares of farmland in one of the most productive agricultural zones in the Southern Hemisphere. Their loss. Your opportunity. Number 8. Queensland and the Eastern Wheatbelt, Western Australia. And Western Australia is the state that people from the eastern seaboard forget exists until they need mining revenue to fund their federal programs. But beyond Perth, beyond the coastal sprawl, beyond the point where the Indian Ocean stops being visible and the landscape opens up into something so vast and so flat that you start to question whether the earth actually curves, lies the Wheatbelt. And in the Eastern Wheatbelt, in towns like Queensland, the land prices are so low that you could buy a property the size of a small farm for less than the cost of a modest wedding in Sydney. Queensland is a small town about 2 hours east of Perth. It has a library, a public swimming pool, a supermarket, a community that actually knows each other's names, which is either wonderful or claustrophobic, depending on your personality type. And surrounding the town, you can find rural blocks of extraordinary size at prices that barely register on the national property radar. We are talking about 96 hectares, which is 237 acres, for those of you who think in old money, for around $190,000. That works out to approximately 19 cents per square metre. 19 cents. You cannot buy a lollipop for 19 cents. You cannot buy a single square of toilet paper for 19 cents. But in the Eastern Wheatbelt, you can buy a square metre of Australian soil. The region is agricultural country, primarily wheat and sheep, and the land reflects that heritage. It is cleared, it is productive, and it has been farmed for generations. The towns in the Eastern Wheatbelt, places like Queensland, Tammin, Calabarin, and Merredin, are small but functioning. They have schools, medical centres, sporting clubs, pubs that serve cold beer and unsolicited opinions in equal measure. The lifestyle is quiet, the pace is slow, and the sky at night is so full of stars that you will briefly consider the possibility that everything you have been doing in the city was a profound waste of the one life you were given. The Eastern Wheatbelt is also undergoing a slow but genuine transformation. Renewable energy projects are bringing investment and employment to the region. Tree change migration from Perth, accelerated by the shift to remote work during and after the pandemic, has introduced a new demographic of residents who work online and live rurally. The towns are not growing fast, but they are not dying either, and that stability, combined with those prices, creates a peculiar kind of opportunity. You are buying into a community that has survived a century of droughts, commodity price crashes, and the existential threat of mechanization replacing manual labor, and is still standing, still functioning, still welcoming newcomers who are willing to trade proximity to a Woolworths for proximity to actual woolly animals. Number 7. Brewarrina, New South Wales. Brewarrina, a town of roughly 1,200 people in far northwest New South Wales, sitting on the Barwon River about 800 kilometres from Sydney. It is remote. There is no polite way to say that. It is remote in the way that makes your GPS nervous and your mobile phone provider send you an apologetic text message about coverage limitations. But it is also a town with genuine history, genuine community, and genuine land prices that make most Australians do a double take. Residential blocks in Brewarrina have been listed for as little as $18,900, under $20,000, for a block of nearly 800 square metres of flat, build-ready residential land. That is not a deposit on a block of land. That is the entire block of land. In a country where the average home loan is nudging $600,000, Brewarrina is offering you the dirt under the house for less than the cost of a mid-range television. The maths is so absurd, it almost feels illegal. Brewarrina is home to the oldest known human-made structure on the planet, an ancient Aboriginal fish trap system on the Barwon River that is estimated to be around 40,000 years old. 40,000 years. That predates the pyramids by roughly 35,000 years. It predates Stonehenge by about 37,000 years. You are buying land next to a structure that was built before most civilizations figured out how to stack rocks on top of each other. If that does not give your property a sense of historical gravitas, nothing will. The town has a hospital, schools, a supermarket, and a pub. It is hot in summer. Properly hot, the kind of hot where the road shimmers and the steering wheel becomes a weapon. And you start to understand, on a visceral level, why the early explorers of inland Australia wrote such miserable diary entries. But the winters are mild, the river is beautiful, and the cost of entry into the property market here is so low that you could theoretically buy multiple blocks and still have change left over from what most people spend on their annual coffee habit. There is a certain freedom that comes with land this cheap. You are not over-leveraged. You are not losing sleep over mortgage repayments. You are not one interest rate hike away from financial ruin. You own the land outright, and whatever happens to the economy, whatever happens to the stock market, whatever happens to the housing bubble that everyone keeps predicting will burst, but never quite does, you have a piece of the earth that belongs to you. In Brewarrina, that piece of earth costs less than a new laptop, and it comes with a river, a hospital, and a 40,000-year-old fish trap that puts every other property feature in the country to shame. Number 6. Tara, Queensland. Queensland, the Sunshine State. The place where property prices along the coast have become so inflated that even the seagulls are considering moving inland. And if those seagulls were smart, they would head west to Tara, a small town of about 850 people, situated roughly 2 hours' drive from Toowoomba in the Western Downs region. Tara is the kind of town that property investors whisper about in hushed, reverent tones because the numbers are almost unbelievable. Land here has been listed for as little as 18 cents per square metre. 18 cents per square metre. You can buy a 12-hectare block, which is 120,000 square metres, all for around $22,000. That is less than most Australians spend on a new car. That is less than some Sydney-siders spend on parking in a calendar year. And unlike a car or a parking spot, the land is not going to depreciate. It is sitting there, solid and permanent, while the surrounding region develops around it. Tara has the basics covered. There is a hospital, a train station, phone and power lines in the streets. The commercial hotel, because every Australian town worth its salt has a pub, and Tara's is the kind of establishment where you can get a cold beer and hear the entire history of the Western Downs from someone who has lived there for 60 years and has opinions about everything. The town is surrounded by agricultural land. And the Darling Downs region, more broadly, is one of Australia's most productive farming areas. Cotton, grain sorghum, cattle. The soil is rich, the water table is accessible, and the future of the region is being shaped by a combination of agricultural expansion and energy development. The growth trajectory for places like Tara is worth paying attention to. Western Queensland land values have been increasing steadily, and the combination of low entry prices and genuine development potential makes this one of the most compelling land investment stories in the country. The energy sector, particularly coal seam gas extraction in the Surat Basin, has brought new economic activity to the wider region. This is not speculative froth. This is resource-backed development that requires workers, services, and infrastructure, all of which create demand for land and housing in surrounding towns. And here is the part that gets interesting from a pure numbers perspective. If you bought a 12-hectare block near Tara for $22,000, and land values in the region continue to grow at even half the rate they have been growing, you are looking at a property that could be worth 2 to 3 times that amount within a decade. And even if growth stalls completely, you still own 12 hectares of land in Queensland for the price of a mediocre holiday. The downside risk is almost non-existent. The upside potential is significant. That is the kind of asymmetric bet that property investors dream about. Will Tara become the next Toowoomba? No, probably not. But does it need to? You are buying 12 hectares for $22,000. And even modest growth turns that into a story worth telling. Right then, we are halfway through, and if you are still watching without subscribing, I need to have a serious word. This is free information about how to buy land in Australia for less than most people spend on brunch. The least you can do is hit that subscribe button and show the algorithm that videos about affordable land are worth recommending. Do it now. The property market waits for no one, and neither does my patience for freeloaders. Subscribe. Number 5. Russell Island, Queensland. Here is a wildcard that deserves more attention than it gets. Russell Island, sitting in the southern Moreton Bay, just a 20-minute ferry ride from Redland Bay, which itself is part of Greater Brisbane. This is not outback Australia. This is not remote. This is an island within commuting distance of one of Australia's fastest growing capital cities, and the land prices are still shockingly low. The reason Russell Island is so cheap has a fascinating and somewhat scandalous backstory. In the 1970s, developers bought the island, convinced the government to rezone it as residential, and then sold over 20,000 plots of land to investors across Australia. The problem was that approximately 14,000 of those lots could not actually be developed. Poor drainage, high tide flooding, no proper infrastructure, no bridge to the mainland, despite promises that one would be built. It was one of the biggest real estate scams in Queensland history, and only the surveyor involved was ever charged. The ripple effects of that scandal are still depressing prices today, is over 50 years later. But here is the thing. Russell Island has changed dramatically. The population has grown by over 30% in the last 5 years, from around 2,800 to over 3,700 people. Infrastructure is improving, with a $48.6 million joint investment from the Queensland Government and Redland City Council funding new ferry terminals, road upgrades, drainage improvements, and recreational facilities. Vacant land blocks are available for as little as $65,000. Land with water views for under $100,000. on an island in Moreton Bay, 20 minutes from the mainland. The median house price is around $380,000, which in the context of southeast Queensland is astonishingly low. Rental yields are sitting around 5%, with weekly rents averaging $440. The population skews older, with the predominant age group being 60 to 69, which means this is primarily a retirement and lifestyle destination. But the growth numbers suggest younger families are starting to take notice. The island has 64 parks, covering nearly 13% of its total area. It has a police station, an RSL club, a bowls club, boat ramps, community events, a ferry service that runs regular schedules and, despite the complaints that all islanders make about all ferry services everywhere in the world, actually works. The key insight about Russell Island is timing. The 1970s land scandal created a massive oversupply of vacant lots that has depressed prices for over half a century. But oversupply does not last forever. Population growth of 30% in 5 years is not insignificant. The $48.6 million infrastructure investment is not cosmetic. And the broader southeast Queensland property market, which has been one of Australia's strongest performers, will eventually pull Russell Island's prices upward simply through proximity. When that happens, the $65,000 blocks will be stories people tell their children about the good old days. And when the infrastructure catches up with the population, which it appears to be doing right now, the days of cheap Russell Island land will be numbered. Number 4. Richmond, Queensland. Now we head west. Properly west. Richmond is a small town of approximately 520 people, sitting almost 500 kilometers west of Townsville and 400 kilometers east of Mount Isa, in the heart of outback Queensland. It is hot, it is dry, it is flat in a way that makes you realize just how much of Australia is essentially a pancake with delusions of grandeur. But Richmond has something that most cheap land destinations do not have: a growth story. According to the Rural Bank Farmland Values Report, the median price of farmland in Richmond was around $120 per hectare, with a cumulative average growth rate of 19.2% over the past 5 years. 19.2%. That is not just growth. That is the kind of return that makes property investors in Sydney weep into their negative gearing statements. Richmond's economy is built on cattle. The surrounding pastoral country supports some of Australia's largest stations, and the beef industry here is not a quaint rural activity, but a serious, multi-million-dollar operation. The town itself has the essentials: a school, a hospital, a pub that serves steaks the size of a small landmass, and a surprisingly impressive dinosaur museum, because the region around Richmond is one of the richest fossil deposits in Australia, with marine reptile remains dating back over 100 million years. The land around Richmond is vast, open, and cheap. If you are looking for pastoral acreage, grazing country, or simply a piece of outback Queensland that costs less than a mid-range bicycle, Richmond deserves your attention. The isolation is real. The heat is real. The nearest major service centre is Townsville, which is a solid 5-hour drive east, and the drive itself is the kind of long, straight, hypnotic outback highway that makes you contemplate your life choices with a clarity that is either liberating or deeply uncomfortable. But the growth numbers do not lie. And in a country where property affordability has become a national crisis, where an entire generation has been effectively locked out of the market by prices that bear no rational relationship to wages, a town offering farmland at $120 per hectare with nearly 20% annual growth is not just affordable. It is mathematically insane. It is the kind of opportunity that future property forums will discuss with the same reverence that current forums discuss people who bought in Surrey Hills in the 1990s. Except in Richmond, the entry price is not hundreds of thousands of dollars. It is the price of a holiday. Number 3. Bourke, New South Wales. There is an old Australian expression, back of Bourke. It means the middle of nowhere. the end of the known world, the place beyond which there is nothing but dust and regret, and the fading memory of a mobile phone signal. And while that reputation is somewhat earned, because Bourke is approximately 800 kilometres northwest of Sydney on the south bank of the Darling River, it is also profoundly misleading. Bourke is not nothing. Bourke is a proper outback town with a population of around 3,000 people, a functioning hospital, multiple schools, supermarkets, cafes, and a cultural heritage that stretches back tens of thousands of years. The Darling River runs through it, which means water, greenery, and a lifeline that has sustained communities in this part of New South Wales since long before Europeans arrived and started naming things after themselves. And the land prices. The land prices in Bourke are enough to make a Sydney real estate agent question the fundamental nature of reality. Residential blocks of over 1,000 square metres have been listed for as little as $19,500, with water, sewer, and power already connected. Walking distance to local shops. $19,500 for a block of land in a town with a hospital and a school and a river and a pub. That is not a property purchase. That is essentially shoplifting with better paperwork. Farmland is even cheaper. The median price of farmland in Bourke was reported at around $103 per hectare, which is substantially below the New South Wales state average of $6,339 per hectare. The cumulative average growth rate over the past 5 years has been 5.3%, which is modest but steady. This is not speculative investment territory. This is long-term, fundamentals-based land acquisition at prices that are, by any reasonable metric, absurdly low. The climate is hot and semi-arid. Summers are brutal. Flies are a lifestyle feature rather than an inconvenience. The nearest city of significant size is Dubbo, about 360 kilometres to the southeast. But Bourke has character, real character. The kind of character that comes from being a town that has survived droughts, floods, recessions, and the quiet indignity of being used as a punchline in geographical expressions. The town's economy is diversified enough to sustain it. Agriculture, primarily cotton, wool, and cattle, remains the backbone. But tourism is growing, driven by the Bourke Exhibition Centre, the natural beauty of the Darling River, and the growing interest in outback experiences among Australians who spent the pandemic years trapped in their apartments and emerged with a fierce desire to see actual open space. The annual median house price in Bourke has been growing at around 12% compound, which is remarkable for a town that most Australians could not locate on a map without assistance. If you want cheap land in New South Wales with genuine infrastructure and a community that has not given up, Bourke is hard to beat. Number 2. Mingenew, Western Australia. Mingenew. Population approximately 450. Located about 370 kilometres north of Perth in the mid-west region of Western Australia. It is the kind of town that does not appear on most people's radar, which is exactly why the land prices are still this low and exactly why you should be paying attention. Residential blocks in Mingenew have been listed for around $19,900, under $20,000 for 850 square metres of residentially zoned land, in a town that has a school, a general store, a community centre, and the kind of tight-knit agricultural community where people actually look out for each other because the nearest alternative is a 3-hour drive away. The Mingenew region is farming country. Wheat, lupins, canola, and livestock dominate the landscape, and the community is built around the rhythms of the agricultural calendar. There is a wildflower season that draws visitors from across the state, because in spring, the surrounding bush erupts into carpets of everlasting daisies that are genuinely spectacular, provided you can overlook the fact that you are in a town with fewer people than a moderately busy food court. What makes Mingenew interesting from an investment perspective is its location relative to Perth and the broader Midwest development corridor. The region is benefiting from mining and resource projects. and the long-term infrastructure outlook is cautiously positive. The town is not booming. Nobody is claiming that Mingenew is the next Fremantle. But at under $20,000 for a residential block, you are paying a price so low that even modest growth over the coming decades turns this into an excellent decision. And if it does not grow, you own a block of land in a beautiful part of Western Australia for the price of a decent holiday. There are worse investments. Number 1. Coober, Pedy, South Australia. And here we are. Number 1. The most affordable place to buy land in Australia. And it is not even close. Not even remotely close. Coober, Pedy, the opal capital of the world. A town where approximately half the residents live underground because the surface temperature regularly exceeds 43 degrees Celsius, and the logical response to that, apparently, is to simply go subterranean, like a civilization of well-adjusted moles with mining permits. Coober, Pedy sits approximately 846 kilometres north of Adelaide on the Stuart Highway, in a landscape so otherworldly that Hollywood has used it as a stand-in for Mars in multiple films, including Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. The population is around 1,700 people. The median house price, and this is not a typo, is approximately $78,000. The cheapest residential land blocks have been listed for as low as $26,600 for 1,800 square meters. That is a corner block in the opal capital of the world for less than most Sydneysiders spend on stamp duty alone. The underground homes, known locally as dugouts, are one of Coober, Pedy's most distinctive features. Carved into the sandstone, they maintain a constant temperature of around 23 degrees Celsius regardless of what is happening on the surface. There are underground churches, underground shops, an underground hotel. The entire town has essentially looked at the concept of surface living and decided, no thank you. We will build our civilization below ground like sensible people. It is genius. Eccentric genius, but genius nonetheless. The economy is built on opal mining. Coober, Pedy produces a significant portion of the world's gem quality opals, and mining remains a viable, if unpredictable, source of income. Tourism is the other major industry, with the town attracting visitors drawn to its unique landscape, its underground architecture, and the somewhat surreal experience of standing in a place that looks like another planet and realizing that people actually choose to live here voluntarily. But the real story for property buyers is the sheer affordability. This is the only suburb in the entire country with a median house price under $100,000. Land prices are lower than anywhere else in Australia, and the town, despite its remoteness, has the essentials: a hospital, a school, shops, a pub, an underground Serbian Orthodox church that is one of the most beautiful places of worship you will ever see, even if you have to descend into the earth to find it. Is Coober, Pedy for everyone? Obviously not. The heat is extreme. The isolation is real. The nearest city is Adelaide, which is an 8-hour drive or a short flight away. But for the price of a Sydney parking space, you can own a block of land in one of the most unique communities on the planet. You can build a dugout and live underground in natural temperature control, while the rest of Australia argues about electricity bills. You can mine for opals in your backyard and potentially strike it rich, or at least find some pretty rocks to put on the mantelpiece. At $26,600 for a corner block, Coober, Pedy is not just affordable, it is an invitation to rethink everything you thought you knew about property, about lifestyle, about what it means to own a piece of Australia. And if the worst case scenario is that you own land in a town that looks like Mars and has underground churches, well, there are significantly worse ways to spend $26,000. The recent trend in remote work has opened Coober, Pedy to a new kind of resident: digital nomads, freelancers, writers, artists, people who need a reliable internet connection and a cheap roof over their heads and have no particular attachment to living within delivery range of Uber Eats. The town's internet infrastructure has improved, satellite coverage is expanding, and the appeal of a town where your monthly living costs are lower than most people's weekly expenses, is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The community is diverse, with over 45 nationalities represented in a town of fewer than 2,000 people, which gives Coober Pedy a cultural richness that you would not expect from a dot on the map in the middle of the South Australian outback. There is a metaphor in Coober Pedy that applies to this entire list. Sometimes the most valuable things are found underground, below the surface, in places that most people overlook because they are too busy staring at the shiny, overpriced real estate on the coast. Australia has land, enormous amounts of land, more land than it knows what to do with. And right now, in 2026, some of the best of that land is available at prices that future generations will look back on and describe as the bargain of the century. And that is the list. 10 places across this enormous, contradictory, occasionally baffling country where buying land does not require a second mortgage, a trust fund, or a complete abandonment of hope. If you made it this far and you still have not subscribed, I have to question your financial judgment, frankly, because someone who ignores free information about cheap land is the same kind of person who pays full price for everything and wonders why they cannot get ahead. Subscribe, hit the bell, share this video with someone who thinks buying land in Australia is impossible and needs a reality check delivered at speed. The next video is coming soon, and it is going to challenge everything you think you know about where you should be living. See you there, mate.